car fixed yet? It's the Studebaker. Yeah, you know, the one with the little doggy in the window that goes...
There are moments in television history that don't just entertain, they wound. They reach through the screen, grab you by the chest, and squeeze until something gives. Most of the time, those moments come from dramas, from crime thrillers, from tearful finales of beloved series that ran for decades. Rarely do they come from comedy shows. And almost never do they come from a woman the entire country had decided was the funniest person alive. But in 1977, Carol Burnett did exactly that. She took her own show, a program that had spent a decade making 30 million people laugh every single week, and she turned it into something else entirely. Something raw, something uncomfortably honest, something so real that when the camera stopped rolling and the studio lights dimmed, her crew stood in near silence, not because they were bored, not because the performance had fallen flat, but because they had just witnessed something they hadn't expected to see on a variety program. Genuine, unguarded human pain. The episode aired once. Critics called it one of the most daring pieces of television that year. Awards followed. Recognition poured in from every direction. And Carol Burnett, the woman at the center of it all, has never sat down and watched it again. Not in the years immediately after. Not during retrospectives. Not in the nearly 5 decades since. Even as Hollywood celebrated it, she quietly turned away. That choice, to create something brilliant and then refuse to look at it, says everything about who Carol Burnett is. And to understand why, you have to go back to where she started. Because that episode wasn't really about a character. It was about her. Carol Burnett was born on April 26, 1933, in San Antonio, Texas. Her childhood was not the kind that gets romanticized in memoirs. Her parents were both alcoholics, deeply incapable of providing the stability a young child needs. Her father moved between jobs, unable to hold anything down for long. Her mother drank heavily and was emotionally unavailable in the ways that matter most. By the time Carol was old enough to understand what a family was supposed to look like, she had already learned that hers didn't quite fit the picture. Both of her parents would eventually die from illnesses connected to their alcoholism. That detail alone, the way the disease claimed 2 lives she'd been born into, would leave a permanent mark on her. It shaped her feelings about addiction, about personal responsibility, and about the kind of love that requires courage rather than comfort. When her parents could no longer care for her, Carol was taken in by her maternal grandmother, Mabel White. In 1940, the two of them packed up and relocated to Hollywood, California. But there was nothing glamorous about their version of it. They moved into a single rented room in a boarding house that had seen better days. The building was filled with people fighting their own battles. People struggling with addiction, mental illness, poverty, and a specific kind of despair that comes from chasing a dream in a city full of dreamers. Carol and her grandmother survived on $20 a week from welfare. It was barely enough to eat. Toilet paper was a luxury they sometimes had to quietly take from the movie theater bathroom down the street when they ran out of home. But inside that cramped, difficult life, something extraordinary was taking shape. Carol had a gift for observation, for imitation, for turning the world's pain into something almost bearable. She invented a fictional twin sister named Karen, a confident and radiant version of herself, and performed her so convincingly for the other boarding house tenants that many of them genuinely believed Karen existed. Carol would race up a fire escape, change her hair and clothes, and return as this entirely different person, cheerful, smooth, charismatic, before disappearing again and coming back as herself. It was theater. It was also survival. Every Saturday, she and her grandmother would spend 25 cents, over 10% of their weekly income, on movie tickets. Those few hours in the dark were sacred. On the screen, life looked the way Carol thought it was supposed to look, beautiful and ordered and full of possibility. She watched actors and absorbed everything. When she heard Johnny Weissmuller's famous Tarzan yell echo through the theater, something lit up in her. She went home and practiced it obsessively, training her voice and her breath without even knowing that's what she was doing. That yell would later become one of her signatures, a piece of joyful absurdity that audiences adored. By the time she reached adulthood, Carol had traded survival instincts for ambition. though the two were never entirely separate in her case. A mysterious stranger paid her UCLA tuition when she couldn't afford it. Another stranger, a wealthy shipbuilder she met at a party, gave her $1,000 and a simple set of conditions. Use it to get to New York, never reveal his name, and if she made it, help others the way he had helped her. She took the money, moved east, and arrived in the city with no connections and no safety net, only the unshakable conviction that she was meant to be there. She lived in a shared boarding house room with 4 other young actresses, checked coats at night, auditioned during the day, and slowly, steadily, found her footing. A comedy song about the Secretary of State, performed with total conviction and perfectly calibrated absurdity, launched her onto national television. The Jack Paar Show, The Ed Sullivan Show, then a Broadway musical that was only supposed to last a season, and ended up running for nearly 500 performances, largely because of her. When she left the production, it closed within a week. Then came The Gary Moore Show, which ran from 1959 to 1962 and turned her into a television star. Then the Carnegie Hall special with Julie Andrews. Then, on September 11, 1967, the Carol Burnett Show premiered on CBS and proceeded to rewrite what American television could be. For 11 straight seasons, the show pulled in 30 million viewers per week. It won 25 Primetime Emmy Awards. It became one of the most influential variety programs in broadcast history, credited with helping inspire the format that would later give rise to Saturday Night Live. Carol Burnett was one of the first women to lead her own variety show at a time when that kind of power was almost exclusively held by men. She didn't just open a door for women in comedy. She built the doorway from scratch. The show was famous for its warmth, its irreverence, and its almost reckless willingness to go completely off-script. Tim Conway, one of the ensemble's key players, famously saved his best material for live tapings rather than rehearsals, ensuring that every performance was unpredictable. His colleagues, Carol, Harvey Korman, Vicki Lawrence, frequently lost their composure on camera, and those genuine moments of laughter became some of the show's most beloved sequences. There was a looseness to it all, a sense that anything could happen, and very often did. But there was also a recurring sketch that ran underneath all the laughter like a darker current. It was called The Family, and Carol played a character named Eunice Higgins, a woman trapped in the frustration of her circumstances, full of unfulfilled potential, perpetually disappointed and perpetually hoping. Eunice wasn't a cartoonish villain or a broad physical comedy type. She was recognizable. She was someone you might know, someone you might, in your worst moments, recognize in yourself. In 1977, the writers decided to do something different with The Family. They weren't going to play it for laughs. They were going to let it breathe, let it hurt, let it be what it actually was beneath all the comedic scaffolding they usually wrapped around it. The episode centered on Eunice's belief that she had a talent worthy of recognition. She was going to perform on a televised talent competition, the kind that, in theory, offered ordinary people a path to something bigger. She rehearsed, she prepared, she believed, and then she stood up in front of the judges and sang, and they dismissed her. They mocked her. They made her feel exactly the way she had always, deep down, feared she would feel, small, ridiculous, and invisible. Carol Burnett played the scene without exaggeration. No comic timing deployed to soften the blow. No wink to the audience. No safety net. She played Eunice's humiliation with complete seriousness, and the result was something that had no business being as devastating as it was on a show that was supposed to make people laugh. When the cameras pulled back at the end of the sketch, the image was of Eunice's tear-streaked face in a slowly dimming light. No music, no laughter, just a woman whose dream had been laughed at, sitting in the ruins of a moment she had built everything on. The studio crew stood in near silence after the taping. People were close to tears. The audience didn't know what to do with it. And when the episode aired, viewers across the country sat in their living rooms in much the same state, unsettled, moved, and somehow grateful for it. Critics responded with immediate and nearly unanimous praise. They called it brave. They called it the kind of thing television rarely dared to attempt. Awards came. Recognition came. And Carol Burnett quietly set the episode aside and never watched it again. She has spoken about it in interviews over the years, always with the same careful honesty. The performance was too real, she said. Eunice's pain didn't feel like a character's pain. It felt like her own, because in ways that mattered, it was... Carol Burnett grew up knowing exactly what it meant to want something desperately and have the world respond with indifference or cruelty. She knew what it felt like to be overlooked, to be dismissed, to be the girl nobody expected anything from. She had converted that knowledge into comedy for most of her career. Used humor as both a shield and a gift to give audiences. But in that sketch, the shield dropped. The conversion didn't happen. The pain just sat there on screen, unprocessed and undisguised. In a later interview with Harper's Bazaar, she was characteristically direct about it. She was glad they made it, she said, but it wasn't what the show was supposed to be. The show existed to help people forget their troubles for an hour. That episode reminded them, and while she respected the work, she simply could not sit and watch herself raw like that. Not then, and not in the decades since. There is something profound in that boundary. Most performers want to review their work, to analyze and critique and improve. The instinct toward self-evaluation is almost universal in the entertainment industry. For Carol Burnett to draw a firm line around this one performance, this one moment of complete vulnerability, suggests that what she put on screen that night was not a performance in the usual sense. It was something she reached down and pulled out of herself, something that had been sitting at the bottom of everything